Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Conceptualism. Very pleased to have with us here today Blake Hargreeves, who is a conceptual multidisciplinary artist, and I'm happy to discuss your myriad works, Blake, and welcome.
Okay, good to be here.
Well, I want to start actually by asking about the current climate, politically, socially, intellectually, that we're living in. We live in rather strange times, and I guess my first question is: do you think this is reflected in the art that's being produced today, both your own and of the colleagues, the peers that you work with?
I guess I think that the art produced in any time is inevitably going to reflect the time in which it's produced. And, I guess weather is a local phenomenon. So it really depends where
You happen to be.
you meet. Yeah.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. I mean, also, there can be a big difference between the climate inside somebody and the climate outside. So
yes, that's very, very true. That's very true. It's very true indeed. So take me back to your childhood, your formative years. What brought you to the Blake Hargreeves we know today, as an artist and as a person?
Well,
I know you're from Ottawa, but
I'm from Ottawa, in Canada, and my first lately the memory I have of the first my first exposure to a kind of live experience of contemporary creation was a dance performance in Ottawa in I guess about 1994 or 93 by a company called Damaged Goods. The choreographer's name's Meg Stewart, and they had a show called No Longer Ready Made, and I started in an arts high school and made friends with another guy, Christy Watson, on the first day, and his mother was the manager of a modern dance company in Ottawa and invited me to see this performance. And I just knew that I was in the right place, and I hadn't had much exposure to that kind of thing otherwise. So my dad would take me to the symphony a lot, which I loved, and I loved classical music when I was a kid. But yeah, that show, it just made it seem like anything was possible, and the freedom in the kind of creation they were doing, I think, was what appealed to me the most. That they seemed to be creating their own rules and creating new emotions, and I couldn't imagine anything better. I mean, it just, yeah, it was so exciting.
Well,
so that's a very precise point on the journey. But I guess, yeah, I grew up with a dad who played the piano and really loved classical music and was sort of in awe of it, having grown up without the kind of privilege that to go very far in that kind of thing. But his mother was really into the piano, and he was no slouch. I mean, he really played some really difficult music on the piano, just as a hobby. He was a journalist. So there was that, and then eventually some kids turned me on to contemporary music. I was just listening to something by Steppenwolf last night and being reminded how deep I got into Steppenwolf when I was a little man, and Guns N' Roses and AC/DC were major influences.
Yeah.
And then the Dead. I actually saw the Dead play when I was 13, with like 100,000 people at an airstrip when Jerry Garcia was still alive. And it was one of the worst concerts I've ever seen, but it was the most amazing concert I've ever been to. They were not, I didn't have the sophistication to appreciate the nuance of their performance. I was listening to them in the early 70s, and like I was listening to the music they were making in the early 70s at the time, and so seeing an early 90s Dead was very different. But that I was into that for a while, and then I got into more kind of edgy, more confrontational styles of music eventually, or challenging or whatever. I guess in some ways I got into the contemporary equivalent of 70s Grateful Dead. So after that, I mean, I guess I just knew I wanted to be one of those people, and so I was doing that kind of music a lot in my 20s, and then the pipe organ came back into my life sort of by accident. But I had played it when I was a teenager, and it was, it's like as loud as an 18,000 watt sound system. I mean, it really it's like a movie theater sound system that one person can control and play on. So, more than having a Marshall stack in your basement or whatever. I mean, it's just sort of like in that ballpark, but even more intense and such an acoustic phenomenon. So it seems like it was inevitable that it would come back. And now I'm in a kind of world where I'm doing a bit of everything that I did growing up, and trying to update those ideas and continue to the conversation with the things that grabbed me when I was so young.
Yeah, that's what I observed about your practice, that it's very referential, both to itself and intertextual references, and combining, I guess you could say, pop culture as well as more esoteric, landmarks and references. And of course, you're an improvising musician, which is something I very much relate to, and it seems also that your journey into the pipe organ was, as you say, like a bit of an accident. It was also a bit of an accident for me, because I'd never played one until I went to a boarding school in India. So it's interesting how this instrument finds its way into people's lives in the most unusual ways and unusual contexts. But but it seems to keep coming back, or keep evolving, or or shape your life and your thinking, even in ways that are so profound. And I like what you said about the sound system, about the Marshall stack, because I think a pipe organ is not just an instrument. It's a self-referential instrument. It's a kind of a borrowing instrument. So I find that your practice as a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary artist fits very much into my vision of what a pipe organ is, which I think is extremely interesting.
Great.
Well,
yeah, I mean, visual art is part of what I do, and I was always attracted to it when I was young, and looking back, it seemed like that was a more of a in my nature kind of thing to do. It didn't come from anything in my family, whereas the music thing was more sort of a nurtured thing. Yeah.
But I mean, I think as artists, we can nurture and cultivate our own interests. So, for example, I didn't really come from a quote unquote musical family, but I came from a family where, logic and numbers, mathematics was very important. My mother is an accountant and my father studied computer science. So then as an artist, I find that my own standards and I guess even their standards are of things having to add up and be logical have kind of reflected through my entire life's work. So it seems that as artists, we inevitably nurture ourselves as much as the environment and our families and our friends nurture us. We cultivate what we want to grow, I guess.
Yeah, well, having spoken to a lot of people who used the pipe organ in the last year and a half.
Yes, through your work on Future Stops, which is incredible, by the way.
Future Stops podcast. One thing that we don't talk about very often, but I often wonder is if there's a reason people are drawn to the pipe organ. I think there's, when I've traveled around recording different organs, and I've recognized a real pull towards conformity when playing in a church space and wanting to experiment, but feeling that pull to not offend anybody or upset any sensibilities, and to sort of fit in. And on a larger scale, I feel like there's an interesting subtext with every artist who approaches the pipe organ from a place, a non-religious, non-worship context that is personal to each musician, but it's a subtext that involves certain ideas about kind of religion, community, conformity, and maybe just wanting to play in that domain, and I think that's kind of like the overarching question that might be answered by this new bunch of people who are taking up the organ with a totally different a different use for it than for accompanying worship.
Absolutely. It is a changing field, and I think the culture of conformity is starting to tumble. That institution, that building, I think is it's useful as a historical reference, but I think it no longer applies in today's organ culture. I think a lot of young people and even not so young people have seen the fruits of doing things in more experimental, unorthodox, and self-questioning and questioning the outside. I think the reflection has been both internal and external in this idea that the practice is not tied to the church. It's not an ecclesiastical practice. That in fact the pipe organ was a civic instrument, and certainly in the 20th and 21st century has a life as a civic and non-church instrument. So it's unfortunate, I think, that people still associate the pipe organ with church, and with conformity. But really, I think the instrument is far more, and it's being liberated, not as fast as I would like, and probably not as fast as you would like either. But I think there are many people, in the field who are asking these critical questions. I would say, including you, because I feel that Future Stops has shed light on this idea that that being an organist is a kind of myriad plethora. It's not just the stodgy old man in the loft, and that even the stodgy old men in the lofts occasionally shake off the cobwebs and do very strange things, and themselves are very strange and exploratory thinkers, even if at first glance it may not appear so.
Yeah. Yeah, there is this kind of cliche with people I've met who play the organ as the center of their life, of being these kind of eccentric types.
Hmm. 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 Yeah, and I mean, when you have an academic or institutional instrument, which is unfortunately the has been the pipe organ's fate for centuries now, the kind of the kind of change that is taking place, is it's one battle at a time. It doesn't happen overnight. So I think even the way the organ is taught in conservatories, in institutions, it's difficult it's difficult to see how that kind of teaching is relevant in today's musical commercial culture and structure, because it doesn't set up musicians to succeed. And I include in that, of course, all classical musicians, because going to conservatory doesn't teach you how to market, how to be literate in networking and building connections and finding business opportunities for your art. So I think a lot of young artists and young musicians have sought guidance from business schools and from other models of enterprise, rather than simply taking a church job, because I don't think that in the 21st century that one can really live on a church job. They don't pay enough. Unless you're in a very, very large parish, they just don't pay enough. So I think that's part of the forum for change, that that the institutions are no longer able to support their way of seeing things. So artists inevitably have to look elsewhere for financial and inspiration and guidance and everything else, and find other avenues for their practice, which would not have been acceptable in the 19th or 18th or 16th century.
So you think that people who play the organ in a non-church context are doing that to make money?
Oh, well, they should be if they're not. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think art and frankly anything, enterprise, and government and museums should try to be self-sustaining, or at least make an attempt. I mean, there's very few museums in the world that are self-sustaining. Almost all of them run in debt. But what I'm saying is they have patrons, they have institutions for fundraising, they have ways to make money to support the work that's being done. And with the pipe organ, because the people that play them generally don't own the instruments, and therefore don't get much of a say in what's done in terms of programming, they have to conform to other people's standards. So absolutely, they should be trying to make money, by playing the kind of music that they want to play in the kinds of spaces that will allow the kind of music that they want to play, and to build, as Cameron has done, their own instruments, which they can then perform on in ways and places that are not bound to convention, that are not bound to stricture, and if they can't support it themselves, to raise money for it, through other avenues, essentially. So yes, I think people who are playing the pipe organ should play for money if they're not, and they should think about money and they should think about finances as a way to release themselves from the shackles of convention and stricture, and to have autonomy, because the most important thing to any artist, I think, is to be able to express what they want to express and what they feel in their hearts, because otherwise, why practice? Why practice? I don't see the point. It's all good and well to love the instrument, to love the tradition and all of that, but if you cannot make it relevant and you cannot say what you want to say, then you're doing something fundamentally wrong, and you have to re-examine your perspective and your context. That would be my point of view. It might offend some people, but that would certainly be my take on it. That it's important to have autonomy as an artist. It's important to dictate the terms of your practice, because yeah, I don't like when artists are subservient. I don't like when organists are working in bad conditions. That's unacceptable to me.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if you agree, but that's you know, that's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's so few businesses that are self-sustaining, not even art museums or whatever, but
Yeah. No, but
just
they seek funding, they seek support, they seek let's say I'm not saying they run in the profit, because that's not at all. I mean, most museums run in debt. But what I'm saying is that that as an artist, you have to find or create spaces that will support what the work that you're trying to do. I mean, that's certainly what I've done, and that's certainly the way forward. I think for people that want to practice the way that they want to practice. That is difficult and it's hard work, but I think the organ world desperately needs people that will take a stand and that will advocate for their point of view and will advocate for the music that they want to hear and they want to be heard. I mean, somebody may really love playing Bach, and if they do, then great, play your Bach. But I don't think every organist wants to play that material. I think there's other organists who want to do different things, and I think having alternate spaces to do that, or spaces that traditionally would have an organ to use their instrument in non-ecclesiastical ways, to have organ concerts, to have experimental art installations in their church spaces that have nothing to do with the mass, so that the organists and the organ community can play the instrument in the ways that they want to play it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, and that's a tricky relationship to negotiate. But I think it can be done if enough people have the courage to take a stand, and to advocate for what they want. That's my point, I think.
It's great to be passionate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe what I'm saying is a little bit unrealistic for some people that that have had steady jobs for many years and don't want to buck tradition. But I think for young people, and I'm talking as a young person myself, speaking to a lot of young organists, I think the idea that we'll do things the way they've always been done is just not true. I think young people and even established organists like Cameron Carpenter have seen that in order to really do what you want, you have to have a little bit of distance from the everyone's good opinion. As my uncle says, you have to be independent of everyone's good opinion. So I think the organ community could do with more independent free thinkers, and however they choose to express that. And I encourage people to do that. So what is I guess my point. And to encourage that kind of thinking should be, I think, welcomed. And it's good that Future Stops does it, and it's good that your practice questions itself and also, your relationship with it, because I find that reflection very interesting and very important.
Well, good.
Yeah. And now I guess I'm going to stop talking and ask you about your exhibition history, the kind of work that you've done. I read on your website the different exhibitions you've done, and I'd be curious to hear your reflections on them.
Which exhibitions? Anything specific, or?
Yes, specifically your time in Montreal. I'm very curious about that.
Well, in the early 2000s, Montreal had what it always has, which is a really large student population, a lot of people excited about life and going out, and so there's room to maneuver, I guess. It's a cosmopolitan society, bicultural society. And yeah, I mean, as I heard when I lived there from people older than me, it was so great back when I lived there, and everybody seems to feel that way. So I guess there's just a really long tradition of, the young people being able to find a way to throw a party and celebrate the music of their peers and socialize. So I was living there, and we had people coming and playing from out of town, and I was traveling and playing in other cities in the United States and stuff, and the whole thing can start to really feel like this inevitable scene. So yeah, anyway, I performed in a few different groups. Most of them were duos. I feel like there's I guess somebody said this once, I can't remember who, that there's sort of three different kinds of music groups. There's playing solo, and that's one thing, and then there's playing in a duo, and that's a totally different thing, and then there's three or more, and that's its own. And those are sort of the three languages of music making. And for some reason, I really seem to zoom in on the duo. It feels like a context where you can have two people almost working independently, but just in parallel, and that our brains are good enough to be able to translate that into something that's sort of entertaining. And that was how I felt about a lot of music that was exciting to me, was hearing this kind of I guess you could call it modern counterpoint, because it's not totally preoccupied with unity and kind of beauty of form, and not as much as before, so you could find like one project I had was guitar and drums and vocals, and we would deliberately choose moments in our music where the drums would be playing a kind of a lead line, like a really lyrical phrasing and sort of gesture or phrase or whatever, and then the guitar and vocals would be on a totally separate but semi-repetitive or recursive kind of thing, and try to tune those just right, so that there was some sort of cosmic balance that had nothing to do with playing together and putting a rim shot in the space where the guitar riff is palm muted or whatever. Like it was different from that. It was so it was sort of more contrapuntal in a kind of modern way.
Well, and
So,
the thing with great counterpoint is that each line should, if it was taken apart, each line should support itself.
Of course, and so that and some other sort of concepts that I picked up over the years were the foundations of those groups, varying levels of improvisation. I was just remembering one of my partners in one of those groups was sort of adamant that we be more prepared when performing, and I felt I had more courage to improvise for people. But looking back, I think that bandmate was correct, and it definitely helps with confidence to be more prepared. I was always interested in the question of true improv versus sort of jamming, and I think of jamming as what most jazz music is, where there's a very defined set of rules in which melody and rhythm are being explored, and timbre to some extent, but you're still using like a handful of acoustic instruments that everybody else is using. So sax and double bass and drum kit and piano. And so there's not only so far you can go in terms of timbre and tone color. Whereas we were working with, instruments with their own limits, but at the time there wasn't a huge long history of stuff that we were listening to with these instruments. And some of them were instruments we made ourselves. And so it felt more like occasionally we were in a more free and vast landscape with a larger possible vocabulary.
Yes, because what you were doing hadn't been institutionalized yet.
Well, at least not to us. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of people who know a lot of music that came before it that defines it, but we only sort of caught up with that afterwards, and we were receiving those signals secondhand. And I was always excited at the idea of trying to compose like auto compose something that sounded almost like a song that has a beginning and a middle and an end, and sort of a narrative arc of drama, and has not been planned in any way, and there's no part of it that has been ever played before by us, because that to me was sort of where jazz and classical music might intersect, and that that was sort of uncharted territory as far as I could see. So that was a huge motivation for that. So we played a lot in spaces in Montreal and a little bit in the States, and a little bit in Europe. And then I showed my art, in a few spaces in Montreal and New York City. And
you had some vernissages.
Montreal. Yeah, just some group shows. I guess a solo show in a stationery store. I mean, it was great because it was possible to be part of the conversation, and that's what's exciting. And every artist I've ever met at every level of commercial success complains about money at one time or another, and their struggles with that. So I'm really happy with what I was able to accomplish, because I was really dedicated and finished what I started when it came to those projects. Managed to publish records and put on shows and have the work be complete. And I think that's sort of how I define success.
That's a wonderful definition. A really wonderful definition. Yeah, and I would concur. To be able to do something and see it through, that is quite an accomplishment. Although the idea of starting something and leaving it unfinished is also a very viable and equally honorable artistic pursuit or choice. I mean, Leonardo da Vinci comes to mind, who left so many things undone. And in a sense, I mean, whatever sense of completion one gets in their lifetime, is maybe like, it's what you said about form and formlessness. I think formlessness can actually be form. I know that sounds very Zen and Kwan-like, but it's like, is something complete? I think it's like we have these little roadmaps, or benchmarks that we set, and when we set them, we feel proud and yes, I did this. But to me, I think completion is both a timestamp and also at the same time kind of a place you can go back to. So the fact that that every artist has a different definition of success, to me is equally important as to have your own personal one. And I think your personal definition is very beautiful, and it's it works for me. I like it. I like that. It's a good working definition. Um, I want to ask you about your explorations, throughout Europe. I listened to your improvisations at the pipe organ, um, and uh, and I wondered if you could share what it was like to get access to these instruments and to record on them, and how that was for you as an experience.
Well, it was very exciting, and I didn't really know what to expect. I just knew that I enjoy that kind of auto composing that I was talking about.
Yes.
It's and usually when I succeed at the time that it's happening and I'm playing and it's being recorded, I might sort of think, there might be a few synapses firing saying, oh, well, I think I've got something here, but never very strong. Mostly I'm preoccupied with doing it, and it's usually comes as a surprise when I listen back after and find something that I say, well, this sounds, this is like a finished piece of music kind of. And so I get a big charge out of that, and always have, and I've always made music that way, to enjoy that feeling. And it was a friend who I was talking to about my plans to go to Budapest and study organ, and then hoping to do some traveling, and also play some concerts, like some electronic music concerts. And I thought I wanted to play organ concerts, but I don't know a lot of repertoire, and I didn't really have the confidence probably to improvise live. And she was like, well, what gives you the biggest thrill? Like, what do you really want to do? And I just sort of thought, well, I just love to, like, I love recording, improvising, and then finding some gems in it after. That was, at the time, so exciting. And so I plotted out a course through Europe, based on some places I'd always want to go, and some places where I happen to know people that I could stay with for a few days. And then in each of those cities, just looked for churches. Sometimes I look on Google Maps and type in the word church over the downtown core or the neighborhood around wherever it is I'm going to be staying, and see what comes up, and click on the photos and see if I can actually see if the church has an organ inside. Or I used a database called the Orgel Site, which is a German global pipe organ database. And I just would write to about 20 different churches or whatever place has an organ in it, and ask them if I could come and play it for 1 or 2 hours. And usually, 1 or 2 or maybe 3 would get back to me and say yes. So it was, and sometimes they ask for money or whatever. I mean, yeah, it's always different, and you never know who you're going to get, who's going to write to you. If you're going to hear from the organist and they're going to have organist type questions, or if you're going to hear from a priest and you're going to have that kind of conversation. But it was a crazy adventure, and it went particularly well, I think, because I did do 8 weeks of study here in Budapest with Paolo Janos at the Liszt Academy. So I did a kind of condensed semester as a visiting student. And it just got my chops into a place where I was able to play at a level that I can only play at with that kind of preparation. Yeah.
So you're prepared for your marathon, and the preparation paid off.
Absolutely. I mean, 2 years later, I did it again, traveling, recording pipe organs, and I did not have that kind of preparation. And the ratio wasn't as good. I mean, that being said, I spent a whole year doing it, so it wasn't, and I wasn't playing other gigs. I wasn't playing electronic music gigs, which I think have this possibly nourishing effect on the way I was playing. I don't really know. Anyway, it's a different time of life, and you know, I don't know how to judge one improvisation against another sometimes, but
Mm.
yeah, the preparation, there's no question, it made a huge difference. Yeah.
Well, on this question of judging your own work, and I think judging art in general, um, I think there are certain objective standards or best practices that we can, use to look at what we've done. But I also think um, sometimes we're not always in the position to really judge what we do. I always find that when other people listen to my music and give me feedback, they always say things that I myself could never have seen. So I, you know, I actually forget what I play after I play it. And so sometimes I'll come back to something I did, uh before, and that I may have thought was not very good. And then I'll listen to it and I'll think, well, now that's very interesting. So do you see your own work as a living document, that even if you judge something one way in one moment, you may revisit the same recording of the same improvisation, years later, and think, well, now that's very interesting. I can see something here that wasn't there before.
It doesn't have to be years later. It can be minutes later.
Minutes later. Yeah.
This is not just art, this is, this is how we feel about ourselves and people around us, and, events that happen every day. So that,
because we're constantly telling ourselves the story of who we are and the story of everything. The narrative.
I think it's important to remember that, that even that critic who writes that terribly cutting review that seems to just annihilate one's creation, that same
Yes.
critic might revisit that creation, like I said, years or minutes later, and feel totally different about it. So yeah,
well, if wine critics and music critics are anything similar, then I think the conclusion that can be drawn is that you must really experience or taste for yourself, instead of relying on someone else's opinion or perspective, right? Because how something tastes to me is very different than how it'll taste to anyone else. So even if a sommelier tells me, this is not a good wine pairing, for example, I might still serve the dish and serve that particular pairing because I think it works. And I think music is very much like that, and so is art, right? Like you said, a critic can listen to the same piece of music and come up with such different opinions that you'd have to take everything with a grain of salt, no matter who it's coming from and how much of a position of authority they have.
Okay, yeah.
Would you agree with this?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I would, I guess it just makes me think, fashion is never over. And, it takes 400 years to have a wine industry in a country,
Yes, Rome wasn't built in a day. But you can imagine that every single artisan that worked on each of the projects, on the sculptures, on the cobblestones, on the works of art, somehow, like you said, we're all a thread in this giant tapestry. So so I think I'm grateful that we can have a perspective, and that we can exercise our perspective. I think that's a huge privilege as well, to be able to live out your practice. you know, because not that history is going to remember everything, because many things are lost in the annals of time, but I think it's worth to I think it's worth to strive towards something, because in the end it's worth it, hopefully, for the person that's doing the striving.
Yeah, I mean, I just try to enjoy my life, you know, when circumstances permit.
Yes. Well, on that note, I'm very, very grateful to have had this conversation. I spoke far more than I was expecting to speak, but but I'm very happy, you know, that we got to have this conversation together. I feel that I know you a lot better now.
Okay, well, yeah, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, and I think my audience will appreciate your work as well. I'll make sure to share some of the links to the things that we've discussed in the episode.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good day, man.
Bye.